I'd like to acknowledge everyone who has got us to this point, and I'd like to strongly encourage Parliament to take the next steps that are necessary and to stick to that goal of making New Zealand smoke-free by 2025.
Mr. Speaker.
Call Dr. Paul Hutchison.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to take a call on the Smoke-Free Environments Controls and Enforcement Bill. This is indeed one of the great occasions, and that is marked particularly by the fact that just about everyone in the Parliament is supporting this very, very important public health measure. And the fact that Parliament does agree on the basic facts, something like 5,000 premature deaths caused through smoking, something like 500 premature deaths caused through second-hand smoking, is particularly salutary. But there is still a long way to go. We're told that there's in the order of 50% of young Māori women still smoking. And again, I think it was Tariana Turia who told us that overall, Māori between 15 and 60, or 50 to 60, was something like 40%, and for the whole population, about 20%. We do have a long way to go. The bill also covers herbal products, and it must be mentioned that experts told us and confirmed that smoking herbal products with it carries significant health harms. 15 years ago, one would hardly have imagined that we would be passing legislation to effectively prohibit retail displays of tobacco and herbal products, including on the internet, including duty-free stores, including sponsored events, and the legislation introduces very tough enforcement laws to back it up. Fines up to $50,000 for corporate offenders. So this indeed is pretty tough on them. There has been accumulating evidence from around the world that removing signage is effective. And last night I described the Pavlovian dog reflex, and certainly the evidence from places like Iceland and Canada have accumulated, and there's no doubt that that particular reflex has been described in the medical literature for many, many years. What we know is that addicts will come into a store or a supermarket innocently wanting a bottle of milk, and bingo, there are the signs in front of them, and they can't resist buying another packet of ciggies. So the evidence behind this is indeed pretty overwhelming. The Health Select Committee worked extremely well together through somewhat complex and challenging set of submissions, but we did all enjoy them. And I remember Kevin Haig in the first reading talking about how intriguing it was to see how individual retailers would think of very ingenious reasons why they should be exempted from this legislation. It was also fascinating to hear one extremely innovative submission that this legislation contravened the Bill of Rights. And as I understand libertarian philosophy, the basic premise is that as much freedom as possible, provided it does not harm others. There is no doubt that second-hand smoke does harm others. Mr. Speaker, finally, may I too acknowledge the many, many individuals and organisations who over a long period of time have contributed to bringing this legislation about. And I particularly want to mention Dr. Murray Logerson, someone who has dedicated pretty well his entire professional career on this subject in New Zealand. Professor Robert Beaglehold, an international expert in this area, and of course organisations, as was mentioned by Minister Tariana Turia. And of course there have been people within this Parliament, and may I mention Minister Ryle, Tauhenari, and of course Tariana Turia for the becoming a legend in terms of championing this legislation. It is great to have multi-party consensus, and this certainly signals another step towards New Zealand becoming smoke-free.